Elias Ward leaned over the blinking console, his fingers moving quickly over the controls. The research base on Arden 9 was quiet, almost too quiet. Most of the human team had gone to sleep hours ago, leaving him alone in the control room. Outside the thick, transparent dome, the moon's barren surface stretched endlessly, pale gray rocks scattered under the dim light of a distant star. The silence made Elias's ears ring. He liked silence sometimes. It helped him think. But tonight, it felt heavier. The base had been monitoring strange energy signals for weeks. The readings were unusual, but Elias didn't feel worried. Human science had faced worse. Yet something deep in his chest felt like caution, a warning he could not name. He shook it off. He had work to do. Suddenly, a shadow moved outside the dome. Elias froze. The lights on the surface didn't reveal much, just a figure, small, standing far away. His heart thumped. The dome's alarms were silent, so nothing should be there. He pressed the external lights. The figure didn't run. It just stood and looked at him. Then the figure moved closer. Elias's pulse quickened. Whoever or whatever it was had a strange glow. The figure stepped into the light. She was a girl, but not human. Her skin was pale blue, smooth and almost glowing under the dome lights. Her eyes were silver, large and full of intelligence and fear. Her hair flowed like water, white with faint streaks of light. Elias blinked. He had never seen anything like her. She raised her hand slowly, pointing at him. Then she spoke. Her voice was soft yet urgent. Elias, listen. You cannot do this. Stop the machine, please. Elias frowned. Who are you? How do you know my name? He moved cautiously toward the door, reaching for the intercom. Security, we have an unknown visitor. She shook her head. No time. You don't understand. The pulse. It is coming. Stop now, or you will die. Elias frowned. The pulse? What pulse? You're not making any sense. Step back. But she didn't move. Her silver eyes locked on his, calm but insistent. I warned you once. You must listen. The machines, they will bring destruction. Turn them off. Elias laughed, a little bitterly. Machines? Destruction? I don't know what you are, but this is a research base. We use machines every day. Nothing bad is coming. You're imagining things. The girl's eyes filled with sadness. I saw it before. My world, gone. I cannot let yours fall too. Elias hesitated. There was something in her eyes that was not lying. Something real. But his pride, his stubbornness, overpowered the fear that crept into his chest. Look, I appreciate your concern, but I can't just shut down months of research because you think something might happen. That is not how humans work. We face challenges. We solve problems. I can handle it. Her small shoulders slumped, but her voice did not waver. Elias, once you ignore this warning, there will be no second chance. And then she turned and left. Elias watched her disappear into the shadows outside. He shook his head. He wanted to call security, but a strange hesitation stopped him. For a moment, he almost thought about following her, about listening to what she had to say, but he told himself it was foolish. There was no pulse. Nothing bad would happen. Humans had survived far worse than this. He returned to his console, trying to focus on the data. The readings were unusual tonight, more erratic than usual, but not dangerous. He checked the energy patterns again, triple-checking. Everything seemed normal, except for the odd spike that had appeared seconds before the girl arrived. He frowned and dismissed it, probably a sensor glitch. The next few hours passed slowly. Elias kept working, but the memory of her silver eyes lingered in his mind. Her warning, the urgency in her voice, the sadness, it all stayed with him, an uncomfortable weight. He shook his head again. Humans did not survive by giving in to fear. He would not give in now. Outside, Asha, the alien girl, watched silently from the rocks. She crouched low, blending into the shadows, her eyes never leaving the base. She could see Elias's confidence, his stubborn refusal to believe. It was human nature, she knew. Humans rarely listened until it was too late. She sighed softly. Her hand brushed a smooth stone at her side. If only he could understand without waiting for disaster. Meanwhile, in the base, Elias worked tirelessly. He analyzed the latest energy readings, wrote reports, and adjusted the research machine. Hours slipped by. The moon's weak sunlight slowly faded into the darkness of Arden 9's long night. Outside, small tremors shook the surface, barely noticeable at first, then stronger. The instruments on the console beeped warnings that Elias ignored. He heard a low hum suddenly, unlike anything before. The machine he was working on vibrated slightly. Elias frowned. "That's odd," he muttered, walking closer to the console. The hum grew louder. The lights flickered. A subtle warmth spread through the metal floor. He frowned, a feeling of unease creeping into his chest. The door hissed as it opened again. Elias spun around. There she was, the girl standing at the threshold. Her expression was even more serious now. "Elias, you must stop it! Now! The pulse is very close!" He ran to the door. "I told you, I won't shut down the machines based on... what? A warning? A dream? You're scaring people!" Her hands went up, almost in desperation. "I am not lying! I saw worlds die! I am telling you the truth! Please, turn it off!" Elias hesitated. Something in the tremor under his feet, the strange vibration of the machine, told him she might be right. But pride still held him back. "No, I can't. I have responsibility here. People depend on me." "We have to finish our research." She shook her head slowly, her eyes glinting with a strange, painful knowledge. "Then you will learn too late." And before Elias could respond, she vanished into the shadows again. The silence returned, but it was heavier now. He could feel the weight of the warning pressing down on him, but he shook it off, telling himself humans always adapted. The night grew colder, darker. The tremors became more frequent. The humming of the machines grew louder, almost like a warning of its own. Yet Elias kept working, determined to finish his tasks. He recalibrated the energy sensors, checked the pressure systems, and monitored the base's energy levels. Each time the lights flickered, he cursed and adjusted the circuits. Around midnight, he finally stepped outside for a break. The air was bitter, but the moon's pale light offered a strange comfort. He walked among the rocks, thinking, could she have been right? He shook his head. No. Humans always survived. Machines could fail, but humans adapted. He was trained. He could handle it. Still, a small part of him, the part that had seen her silver eyes, wondered if he had made a mistake. Hours passed. The first signs appeared slowly, a flicker in the lights, the hum in the machines growing deeper, vibrating through the floor. The research console beeped errors that Elias quickly dismissed. He was too stubborn, too proud to admit fear. Then, without warning, a tremor strong enough to shake the dome struck. Instruments went haywire. The energy readings spiked uncontrollably. The hum turned into a roar, echoing through the base. Elias's heart raced. He ran to the console, trying to regain control. Warnings flashed across every screen. He hit buttons, flipped switches, pulled levers. Nothing worked. The machine, the pride of months of human work, resisted him. It hummed louder, shaking violently, and the dome itself quivered. Elias felt fear, real fear, for the first time that night. And then, as if the universe itself obeyed her warning, a wave of energy swept across the base. Lights went out. Panels sparked. Computers shut down. Machines fell silent. Silence returned, heavier than ever, but it was a silence full of danger. Elias stumbled back, realizing the girl had been right. The pulse, the destruction she warned about, was real. Outside the dome, the wind howled. A strange glow lit the horizon, pale and deadly. Elias felt the cold bite of fear deep in his bones. He wanted to run, to hide, to fix everything, but he was powerless. For the first time, he understood what she meant. A hand touched his shoulder. He spun around. She was there, Asha, the alien girl, her silver eyes calm and steady. "I told you," she said softly. "You did not listen. But I am here now." Elias stared at her, shame and relief mixing in his chest. He had ignored her warning. He had thought humans could handle everything. He had been wrong. The dome trembled again. Debris fell from the ceiling. He grabbed Asha's hand without thinking. She guided him toward the exit, moving faster than he thought possible. Every step was a struggle as machines failed, lights went out, and alarms remained silent. Outside, the barren landscape of Arden 9 seemed more dangerous than ever. But with her hand in his, Elias felt a strange sense of hope. He had ignored her once, but now she was here to save him. The girl who warned him, who he had refused to believe, had returned. And if he survived this night, he knew the world as he knew it would never be the same again. He swallowed hard, looking at her. I should have listened," he whispered. Asha nodded, not judging, only moving him forward. "It is not too late. Yet." Together, they ran across the gray rocks of Arden 9. The first night of danger had come, and humanity's stubbornness had been tested. Elias realized that survival would demand more than courage. It would demand trust, humility, and the willingness to listen when someone truly knew better. And for the first time, he truly understood the meaning of her warning. Elias stumbled across the gray, rocky surface of Arden 9, the cold wind biting at his face. His heart raced, and his lungs burned from the effort of running, but he could not stop. The base behind him was in ruins. Lights had gone out, machines lay broken, and the alarms that were supposed to warn them had fallen silent. He could hear nothing but the low, distant hum of the pulse, a sound that seemed alive and hungry. Asha moved beside him with a calm but determined stride, guiding him over jagged rocks and past deep crevices. Her silver eyes were fixed on the horizon, scanning for danger, and her hand gripped his tightly. Elias tried to keep up, stumbling more than once, cursing his own slow reflexes. He had never felt so small, so powerless. He had thought he understood technology, understood danger, understood the universe. Tonight, he realized he had been foolish. "This way," Asha said, her voice soft but urgent. "The shelter is close. You must keep moving." Elias nodded, swallowing hard. I never thought something like this could happen. Machines, they always worked. We always controlled them." Asha's expression did not change. "Control is an illusion. Machines obey rules, yes, but some forces do not. This is why I warned you." He bowed his head, shame filling his chest. He had ignored her warning. He had thought humans could face anything with technology. Now, the consequences were clear. The hum of the pulse grew louder, surrounding them, vibrating through the ground. It was invisible, unstoppable, and indifferent to life. They reached a narrow canyon hidden from view where the rocks formed a natural shelter. Asha led Elias inside, pressing him down into the shadows. He could hear the wind howl outside, carrying with it an energy that made the air feel thick and heavy. Sparks of light danced across the horizon, and the ground trembled beneath them. Are we safe here?" Elias asked, his voice trembling. "Safe enough," Asha replied. "The shelter is protected by the rocks. The pulse cannot reach inside directly, but we cannot stay here long. You must learn to survive without machines. Can you do that? Elias looked around, realizing for the first time how dependent he had become on technology. His tools, his instruments, his consoles, they were useless now. He was a human without machines. The thought terrified him. I don't know. I've never lived like this. Asha's eyes softened slightly. Then you will learn. You have courage, Elias. That is enough to begin. The first night was long. Elias shivered in the cold rocks, watching the strange light of the pulse sweep across the horizon. He could see distant structures collapsing, fires erupting, and shadows of humans and machines falling helplessly in the chaos. He realized how small and fragile humans could seem without their technology. Yet, despite everything, he also felt a strange spark of pride. He was still alive. That meant there was hope. Asha sat beside him, quiet but alert. She seemed at ease in the dangerous world outside, as if she had survived this countless times before. Humans rely too much on machines, she said finally. It makes them strong in one way, but weak in another. You will see soon. You must use your mind, your body, your instincts. That is how you survive now. Elias nodded, shivering. I understand, I think. The next morning, the wind died down slightly. But the sky remained strange and dark. The surface of Arden 9 had been scarred by the pulse. Rocks were scattered, craters had formed, and the distant ruins of the research base glowed with occasional sparks. Elias's stomach twisted at the sight. Months of work, destroyed in hours. Yet Asha remained calm, her eyes searching for a safe path forward. You must learn quickly, she said. Another wave may come soon. The pulse moves in cycles. You have little time. Elias swallowed hard. Then teach me. Show me what to do. Asha nodded and began instructing him. She demonstrated how to make simple shelters using the rocks, how to find safe water, and how to use basic tools to protect themselves. Elias struggled at first. His hands were clumsy, his mind accustomed to consoles and wires, not stones and survival. He fell, scraped his knees, and cursed quietly. But he kept going. He realized that fear could be a teacher. Every mistake taught him something. Every bruise and scrape made him stronger, more aware. He began to feel a strange thrill in learning how to survive without machines. It was human, raw, and real. Days passed. The team inside the base was no longer reachable, and Elias knew many of his colleagues had not survived. The pulse had been merciless. But he also noticed something new. Humans could endure. They could adapt. He remembered Asha's words and began to appreciate their truth. Courage and ingenuity could rival any machine. One day, while exploring a small canyon for supplies, Elias stumbled upon a partially buried drone. The machine was dead, its circuits fried by the pulse. He crouched beside it, touching its cold surface. I thought I could fix this, he murmured. I thought humans could control everything. Asha crouched beside him. Some things you cannot control, but some things you can. Your mind, your decisions, your courage, those are yours. Protect them, and you can survive anything. Elias nodded slowly. He realized she was right. Machines could fail, disasters could strike, but humans had something different. They had creativity, determination, and the ability to learn. Even in the face of overwhelming danger, humans could rise. As the days continued, Elias and Asha formed a routine. They searched for safe shelters, gathered water from hidden sources, and learned to move quietly across the jagged terrain. Elias began to notice the beauty and the harshness of Arden 9, the sharp lines of the rocks, the way the light reflected off the pale surface, and the quiet resilience of life that still clung to the edges of the craters. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant mountains, Asha turned to him. Elias, you have learned quickly. You are ready to help others. Humans are not all lost. If you can survive here, you can lead. Elias felt a surge of pride mixed with fear. Lead? How? Most of my team. I don't know if anyone survived. Asha placed a hand on his shoulder. Survivors exist. You must find them. Show them how to live without machines. Show them courage. That is the way humans endure. The thought filled him with both dread and purpose. He had failed once by ignoring her warning. He could not fail again. He would not. That night, they heard faint cries in the distance. Elias froze. Voices? Are those humans? Asha nodded. Yes, some survived. They are scared. They are confused. You must help them. They moved toward the sounds, navigating carefully through jagged rocks and deep craters. Elias's mind raced with questions. How many had survived? How could they help without machines? What would happen if another wave of the pulse arrived? When they reached a small group of survivors, Elias realized the scale of the disaster. Men and women, tired and frightened, huddled together. Some were injured. Some had attempted to use machines only to have them fail completely. Fear and despair were everywhere. Elias stepped forward. My name is Elias Ward. I survived. With help. You can survive too. Follow me, and I will show you how. The survivors looked at him skeptically. They had relied on machines for everything, and now they were powerless. How could one man without tools, without machines, help them survive? Asha stepped beside him. I will help, she said. Together we can guide you. You are stronger than you think, but you must learn quickly. Elias took a deep breath and began teaching them what he had learned. They built simple shelters from rocks. They found water in hidden streams. They moved quietly and carefully across dangerous terrain. Slowly, fear began to transform into hope. Humans were resilient. They adapted. They endured. The days passed, and Elias watched as the survivors grew stronger. He realized something he had never understood fully before. Technology was useful, but it was not the source of humanity's true strength. Creativity, courage, determination, and the will to survive, those were what made humans extraordinary. Even when everything else failed, humans could rise. One morning, Elias stood at the edge of a crater, looking at the distant ruins of the base. The wind had cleared some of the haze, and the strange glow of the pulse was fading for now. He thought of the girl who had warned him, of her silver eyes and calm voice. He had ignored her once and nearly paid the price, but now he understood. He turned to Asha. We saved some. We can save more. We can survive this. Asha smiled faintly. Yes, you have learned. Now you must lead. Humanity has a chance, but you must guide them. Elias nodded, feeling a new sense of purpose. The pulse had destroyed much, but it had not destroyed humanity. Humans could endure, adapt, and rise. He would make sure of it, and as he looked at the horizon, he knew the true challenge was only beginning. Another wave could come. Danger would always return. But now, Elias understood what humans could do when they relied not on machines, but on courage, ingenuity, and each other. He had learned, and he would not forget. The alien girl had warned him once. He had not listened. But now, with Asha by his side and humans learning to survive without machines, he would make sure the next time humanity faced such a threat, they would not fail. Elias sat on a jagged rock, looking over the small group of humans he had guided with Asha. The survivors were scattered across the canyon, some tending to makeshift shelters, others collecting water or preparing food. Their movements were slow, careful, but purposeful. Elias felt a swell of pride. Despite everything, They were learning. Humans could adapt when they had no choice. And now he had a real chance to lead them through this disaster. Asha crouched beside him, scanning the horizon. Her silver eyes reflected the pale light of Arden 9, calm and thoughtful. "The next wave will come soon," she said softly. "We must be ready. Humans alone cannot survive it. You must teach them more." Elias nodded, already thinking about the task ahead. Teaching people to survive without machines was one thing, but preparing them to face a destructive cosmic wave was another. He needed strategy, careful planning, and most importantly, teamwork. "Then we will prepare them. They need to understand that survival is more than just hiding. They need to act together, help each other, and think beyond fear." Asha's expression softened. "Yes, that is why I came back to help you. Humans have courage, Elias, but you must show them how to use it together." Over the next several days, Elias worked tirelessly. He divided the survivors into small groups, teaching them basic survival skills: how to find water in hidden streams, how to create simple shelters with rocks and sand, how to use rudimentary tools to secure their environment. Every day brought new challenges. Some survivors were hesitant, clinging to the idea that machines could save them. Others were injured or too exhausted to focus. Elias felt the weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders. He could not afford mistakes. Every decision mattered. Every teaching moment could mean life or death. He reminded himself that humans had survived disasters before, on Earth and in space. They were adaptable, clever, and persistent. They could endure if he guided them properly. Asha watched silently most of the time, offering advice only when necessary. She taught Elias how to anticipate the patterns of the pulse, how to detect subtle changes in the wind and ground, and how to use the terrain to protect the survivors. She taught him to move like the alien people, blending with the environment, avoiding unnecessary exposure to danger. One morning, as the twin suns of Arden 9 rose weakly above the horizon, Elias gathered the survivors for a meeting. "Listen carefully," he said, his voice firm but calm. "The next wave of the pulse will be stronger. Our shelters must be reinforced. We must move carefully and work together. No one can act alone. Everyone must help each other." Some survivors nodded, fear still visible in their eyes, but determination beginning to take root. Others hesitated, still clinging to old habits, old dependence on machines that no longer worked. Elias focused on them, speaking directly. "I know this is hard. I know you trusted machines, but we are still alive, aren't we? That is proof we can adapt. Proof that humans can endure even without technology." He looked around at each face, meeting their eyes. "We will survive this together. Each of us has a part to play. Do not wait for machines to save you. Use your mind, your courage, and your strength. That is how we will endure." The survivors began to organize themselves under his guidance. Small teams formed to search for food and water. Others reinforced shelters with rocks and sand, creating walls to protect against wind and debris. Elias moved from group to group, teaching, encouraging, correcting mistakes. Asha followed, silently observing, stepping in only when necessary. During this time, Elias also worked on improving communication among the survivors. Without technology, they needed a system to signal danger, to coordinate movements, and to help injured people quickly. They created flags from fabric, simple hand signals, and routines that everyone could remember. Every small improvement gave them confidence. Every success reinforced the lesson that humans could endure without machines. As the days passed, Elias noticed another change in himself. He had always believed that human strength came from machines and knowledge alone. Now he realized that true strength came from unity, courage, and ingenuity. Humans could face anything if they relied on each other and their own abilities. Machines were tools, but survival depended on humans themselves. One evening, as the survivors rested in their shelters, Elias sat beside Asha. "I see it now," he said quietly. "I thought humans were only strong with machines, but you're right. We can endure. If we work together and think clearly, we can survive." Asha nodded, her silver eyes reflecting the dim light of the shelter. "Humans are remarkable. They face challenges and adapt. That is why I returned. You have learned quickly, Elias. Now you must lead them through what comes next." Suddenly, a distant rumble echoed across the horizon. Elias stood, his heart pounding. He could feel the vibrations in the ground. Asha's expression tightened. "It is beginning," she said calmly. "The second wave of the pulse is coming. You must be ready." Elias ran through the shelter, checking on each group. The survivors looked to him, fear mixed with trust in their eyes. "Get to your positions," he called. "Follow the routines we practiced. Stay calm. Work together. You can do this." The rumble grew louder. Dust and small rocks began to shake loose from the canyon walls. The wind picked up, carrying a strange energy that made the air thick and hard to breathe. The survivors moved quickly, following Elias's instructions. Some were injured, some terrified, but all were determined to survive. Elias stayed close to Asha as they guided the groups. "Remember your positions," he shouted over the rising wind. "Help each other. Do not panic. Stay together." The first pulse hit with sudden intensity. The ground shook violently, rocks tumbling and dust rising like smoke. Some shelters collapsed under the force. Elias and Asha worked quickly, pulling survivors to safer areas, reinforcing walls, and guiding people through narrow passages. Fear was everywhere, but courage began to show as well. Humans were learning to endure. One group panicked, trying to run across open terrain. Elias ran toward them, shouting, "Stay together! Use the rocks for cover!" He reached them just as a small wave of energy passed, forcing them to dive behind jagged stones. Breathing heavily, he helped them regain composure. Another group struggled to lift heavy rocks to reinforce a shelter. Elias joined them, showing them how to balance the weight and use leverage. Slowly, the shelter became stronger, able to withstand the shaking ground and the unpredictable force of the pulse. Asha moved among the groups, silently guiding, instructing, and protecting. Her movements were precise and calm, a stark contrast to the chaos around them. She intervened only when necessary, letting humans learn by doing, building confidence in their own strength. The hours passed like an eternity. The second wave continued, more intense than the first. Machines were useless, failing immediately under the cosmic energy. Humans were on their own, but Elias's leadership and Asha's guidance kept them alive. Finally, as the pulse began to fade, silence returned. Dust settled, and the survivors emerged from their shelters, bruised and exhausted but alive. Elias looked around at the group, pride swelling in his chest. They had endured. They had learned. They had survived without technology, relying only on courage, ingenuity, and teamwork. Asha approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You did well," she said. "Humans are strong when they rely on themselves. You showed them how to survive without machines. That is why you live. That is why they live." Elias nodded, breathing heavily, sweat and dust covering his face. I never believed it at first. I thought humans needed machines to survive, but now I see. Humans endure because they adapt, because they think, because they refuse to give up. That is our strength." Asha smiled faintly. "Yes, and now you must help them rebuild. The pulse will come again. You must be ready. Humans can survive, but only if they work together and never forget the lessons they have learned." Over the next days, Elias and Asha continued their work. They strengthened shelters, taught new skills, and guided the survivors in exploring safe areas for water and food. They moved carefully across the damaged landscape, avoiding areas that had been hit hardest by the first two waves. Each success reinforced the lesson that humans could endure, adapt, and thrive even when technology failed. One morning, Elias gathered the survivors once more. "We have survived 2 waves," he said, his voice strong. "We have learned to work together, to adapt, to think and act without machines. That is why we are alive. But this is not the end. More challenges will come. The pulse may strike again. You must remember what you have learned. Trust yourselves. Trust each other. That is how we will endure." The survivors nodded, understanding the weight of his words. Fear was still present, but courage and determination shone in their eyes. They had learned that humans could rise even when everything seemed lost. Asha stood beside Elias, silent and observant. She had warned him once, and he had not listened. Now he had learned, and he had led humans to survive. She felt a quiet pride in him. He was not perfect, but he had learned humility, courage, and leadership. Humans could endure, and with guidance, they could face almost anything. As the suns rose over Arden 9, casting pale light on the rocky surface, Elias looked at the survivors, then at Asha. "We have survived," he said softly, "and we will survive again, together." Asha nodded. "Yes, together. That is how humans endure. That is how they rise." The moon of Arden 9 was quiet now, but Elias knew the danger was not gone. Another wave could come, another disaster could strike. Yet, for the first time, he was not afraid. He understood what humans could do when they relied on each other, on courage, and on their own abilities. They had endured, and they would rise again. The alien girl had warned him once. He had not listened. But now, with humans learning to survive, working together, and trusting each other, Elias knew they could face the next challenge. They were alive, they were strong, and they were ready. The sky over Arden 9 had grown strange and heavy. Dust and energy swirled in the distance, and the faint hum of the pulse vibrated through the ground like a warning drum. Elias stood on a rocky ridge, looking over the group of survivors he had guided. The humans were scattered across the terrain, tending to shelters, gathering supplies, and helping one another. Each face showed determination, a quiet courage that had grown stronger with every challenge they had faced. Asha stood beside him, her silver eyes scanning the horizon. "The final wave is approaching," she said calmly. "It will be the strongest. You must lead them wisely. Every decision matters." Elias swallowed, feeling the weight of responsibility press down on him. He had learned much since the first warning and since surviving the first 2 waves, but this would be the ultimate test. The pulse did not forgive mistakes. It did not distinguish between the weak and the strong. It simply destroyed. He turned to the survivors who had gathered at the base of the ridge. "Listen to me carefully," he said, his voice firm. "The final wave is coming. We have survived before, but this time we must work perfectly together. Every shelter must be reinforced. Every team must know their role. Trust each other. Follow every instruction. Humans endure because they act as one. That is how we will survive again." Some nodded, their faces pale but determined. Others looked scared, but Elias could see the spark of courage beginning to shine. He remembered Asha's first warning, her silver eyes filled with urgency and sorrow. He had ignored her once, but he would not make that mistake again. The group moved quickly, following the routines Elias and Asha had taught them. Teams worked to strengthen shelters with rocks and sand, using simple but effective techniques to withstand the tremors and energy pulses. Other teams dug trenches and channels to divert debris and energy flows away from the living areas. Small signals were posted around the shelters to warn of danger, and hand signs and flags communicated instructions across distances. Elias moved between the groups, checking, correcting, and encouraging. He felt a strange pride. These humans had learned, adapted, and grown stronger. They had survived chaos before, and now they were ready to face the greatest challenge yet. The ground trembled. The hum of the pulse grew louder, vibrating through the rocks beneath their feet. Dust rose in the air, and the distant horizon glowed with a pale, eerie light. The final wave was here. "Positions!" Elias shouted, moving toward the central shelter. "Everyone, stay calm. Remember what we practiced." The first pulse hit violently. The ground shook and rocks tumbled from the ridges. Some shelters swayed, but the reinforcements held. Survivors ducked and held onto sturdy rocks, following the routines Elias had drilled into them. They moved together, helping each other when necessary, sharing strength and courage. A smaller tremor shifted the ground near a supply area where a group of survivors struggled to secure their shelter. Elias ran toward them, shouting, "Use the rocks! Hold together!" He grabbed a fallen boulder and helped balance it into place, steadying the shelter just as a pulse of energy swept across the ridge. The survivors watched him and began working more confidently, realizing that courage and action could withstand fear. Asha moved silently among the groups, guiding and protecting. She did not do the work for the humans. She showed them how to use their own strength. When a small group panicked, trying to flee across open terrain, she stepped between them and the pulse, shielding them while guiding them back to cover. Elias watched, understanding now the full meaning of her guidance. Humans could endure, but they needed leadership and trust. Hours passed, and the wave continued, relentless and merciless. Machines remained useless, broken beyond repair, their hum replaced by silence. But humans endured. They had adapted. They had learned to use the environment, their minds, and their courage to survive. They were no longer dependent on machines. They were dependent on each other, and that was enough. Elias moved to the highest point he could reach, looking across the landscape. He saw the chaos of fallen rocks, dust, and tremors, but he also saw signs of life and resilience. Humans were helping each other, carrying the injured, and reinforcing shelters in real time. Their endurance was extraordinary. He realized that humanity's strength had never come from technology alone. It had always come from courage, ingenuity, and the will to survive. Another pulse swept across the horizon. It was stronger than the previous ones, but the survivors were ready. Teams moved with precision, following signals and instructions. Elias saw a small group struggling to move a heavy stone, but instead of panicking, they worked together, balancing the weight and reinforcing their shelter just in time. Asha joined him at the ridge. "They are learning," she said. "Humans endure because they adapt, because they cooperate, and because they have courage. You showed them that. You led them through what most would not survive." Elias nodded, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and pride. "I only hope it is enough. The next wave may be stronger than anything we faced." Asha looked toward the horizon. "It will be, but they are ready. Humans can endure anything if they trust themselves and each other. That is why I warned you. That is why you survived. And now, they will survive too." The final pulse struck with incredible force. The ground quaked, dust and debris flying in all directions. Some shelters shook violently, some partially collapsed, but the reinforced structures held. The humans moved with coordination and calm. They lifted rocks, secured walls, and helped each other to safety. Elias ran among them, shouting instructions, helping where he could, but mostly watching. The lesson was clear. Humans could rise to any challenge when they believed in themselves and each other. One group had been cut off by falling debris. Elias sprinted toward them, dodging tremors and unstable rocks. He reached them just as a pulse swept past, knocking some to the ground. He pulled them up, guided them behind cover, and showed them how to reinforce their shelter quickly. The group worked with him, trusting his guidance and their own strength. Hours passed, and finally the intensity of the wave began to fade. Dust settled, rocks stopped tumbling, and the ground trembled less. Silence returned, heavy but filled with relief. The survivors emerged from their shelters, bruised and exhausted, but alive. They looked around, seeing the destruction of the landscape, but also seeing signs of life and endurance. Elias walked among them, checking on each person, helping where needed, and offering words of encouragement. "We survived," he said, his voice steady. "We endured because we worked together, because we trusted ourselves and each other. That is why we are alive." The survivors nodded. Some with tears in their eyes, others with quiet smiles. They had learned something vital, that humans could survive even when all machines failed, even when the world seemed against them. Their strength came from courage, cooperation, and determination. Asha approached Elias, her expression calm and proud. "You did well," she said. "They will survive because of you. Humans endure because they learn, because they trust, and because they do not give up. You showed them that." Elias looked at the horizon, where the damaged landscape stretched endlessly. He thought of the alien girl who had warned him, her silver eyes filled with urgency and sorrow. He had ignored her once and nearly paid the price, but now he understood. She had not come to save him. She had come to give him a chance. He had learned, and now humanity had survived because he listened, because he led, and because they believed in themselves. Over the next days, Elias and Asha helped the survivors move to safer areas, reinforcing shelters, finding water, and establishing routines. Each success built confidence. Each challenge was met with courage. Humans were no longer weak without machines. They were strong, resilient, and capable of enduring anything. One morning, Elias gathered the survivors together. "We have survived the final wave," he said. "We have endured what many thought impossible. We have learned that humans are not defined by technology. We are defined by courage, by ingenuity, and by our willingness to help each other. That is what makes us strong. That is why we rise." The survivors looked at him, their faces showing pride, relief, and hope. They had endured, they had learned. They were ready for whatever challenges came next. Asha stood beside him, her silver eyes reflecting the sunlight. "You have led them well," she said. "They will survive because they trust themselves, because they trust each other, and because they remember the lessons you taught them. Humans endure, Elias. That is why I came back." Elias nodded, feeling a sense of completion. He had failed once by ignoring her warning, but he had learned. He had guided humans to survive when all seemed lost. The pulse had tested them, but humanity had endured. As the suns rose over Arden 9, casting pale light over the rocky terrain, Elias and Asha looked at the survivors working together, rebuilding shelters and moving with confidence and purpose. The alien girl's warning had been heeded, and humans had risen to the challenge. Elias took a deep breath. "We have survived. We will survive again, together." Asha nodded, smiling faintly. "Yes, together. That is how humans endure. That is how they rise." And for the first time since the disaster began, Elias felt hope, not just for himself, but for humanity. They had faced the pulse. They had endured the impossible, and they had risen stronger than before. The alien girl had warned him once. He had not listened, but now humanity had learned, adapted, and survived. They were alive, strong, and ready for the future. They had risen, and nothing could take that away. Elias turned to Asha. "Next time, I will listen immediately," he said quietly, a small smile on his face. Asha's silver eyes glimmered. "That is the difference, Elias. Humans endure when they learn from their mistakes. That is why you survived. That is why they survived. That is why humans rise. The wind blew gently across the rocks of Arden 9. The pulse was gone for now. But humanity remained, resilient, courageous, and unbroken. Elias watched the survivors work together, and he knew that no force in the universe could destroy them if they stayed united, if they stayed brave, and if they never forgot the lessons of endurance and courage. Humans had risen, and the future was theirs.